Hey, everybody, it's September 9th, 2021. I'm Eric Clancy alongside Patrick Kelly. We're the Weekday Warriors of Wrestling. Big, big week for wrestling.
Really? What happened?
So little. I heard so little about it. It was, geez, I mean, and really for AEW, WWE kind of silent. AEW, they had Rampage didn't do much, but All Out was everybody's saying it, so this isn't like a hot take or anything, but All Out was their best pay-per-view I think they've ever done, in my opinion. And granted, I've got recency bias right now. I've just seen it just like everyone else. So I will love to see how that stacks up in 8 months when I go back and revisit it. But I mean, my initial reaction, this is probably AEW's best pay-per-view in forever, best pay-per-view ever, and probably their best pay-per-view over since Double or Nothing. I mean, I know that defeats the purpose of what I said. If it's the best, it's the best, but nothing since Double or Nothing has even come close to this. 2019, I'm talking about. So yeah, let's hop right into it, because there's a bunch of stuff I want to talk about. I guess, Patrick, let's just gut reaction on All Out, then we can talk about Dynamite, then we can talk about the ratings news that came in, then we'll get to the question, we'll get to a Q&A section at the end. But yeah, what'd you think?
I thought the show was stellar. It was one of those weird shows where it flew by. I enjoyed almost everything on the show, and I think I told you over text I was marking out almost the entire night. It's really funny, and we'll get into this when we talk about the particulars, but the main draw of the show, which was Punk and Darby, was probably the most straightforward thing on the show. Everything else just threw all these curveballs and all these big debuts and big moments and everything. It was just a thoroughly entertaining show all the way throughout.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it really was. It, for the most part, did not suffer. It's funny because I'm looking at the match times, and I'm always like, AEW does too many long matches, and I'm seeing here basically 4 20-minute matches. But MJF and Jericho was 1930, but one was a battle royal, so it didn't really count, and the other two flew by. So normally I'm like, there's too many 20-minute matches, but I really thought this was a great show. I mean, let's go with the main event. Let's start there, because that's the big thing. So this over delivered for me by far. And Patrick, I've said it to you since he debuted. I've said it, like a guy like Christian Cage is not really a needle mover, and in 2021 I don't think he really matters, and to a degree I think that's true from an audience standpoint, but from an actual match standpoint, I thought this was a fantastic match. I thought it was great. I thought it told a great story. I love that Kenny went over clean. He's I know there was a little bit of that interference, but essentially he just one-winged angel them off the top rope, and Kenny Omega wins again. Before we get to some of this stuff after the match, what did you think of the match?
I'm with you. It over delivered. And we did it. We talked about it in our preview show, where we said, oh, if this goes on last, people are going to walk out. But I think the rumors breaking out that Brian Danielson and Adam Cole might show up. I think that kind of kept people's attention, because they were expecting something big to happen once those rumors were dropped. And because of that, I think they were more invested in the match than they would have been otherwise. And I think Omega and Christian, I think they both collectively knew, it's look, nobody really cares, so let's just go all out and get them to care. And I think they delivered.
Yeah.
And thank God the finish was the top rope finisher, which is almost never the case.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, when they had Punk, Darby Allin come out, I'm like, oh, this is stupid. This is a dumb move. But obviously, knowing that they had Daniel Bryan involved in the main event and they had Adam Cole, obviously you had to go on with this. And I thought it was and it worked out, really well. And the ending of the match was more talked about than anything AEW's ever done. So, there's that. I mean, after the match, we all saw it. Adam Cole comes out and feigns like he's going to fight them. But since he's been in the Elite and he's been their friends forever, he was like, just kidding. And then Kenny's like, haha, that's how we go out. That's it. And there's like a part of you is like, well, I've heard all the Brian Danielson stuff, but like it's probably done because they're not going to debut both of them. And then of course he comes out. I thought it worked from a kayfabe standpoint. I thought it worked in an execution standpoint. The possibilities going through my head there were amazing. I'm like, oh, so is this how they introduce the trios titles? Is it going to be like Cole and the Bucks against Christian Cage and Jurassic Express? Obviously the next night on Dynamite, Daniel Bryan kind of called out Kenny. So it seems like we're heading in that direction, which makes me nervous as shit because I really think Hangman should be the guy to beat Kenny, but we'll see. I mean, I generally trust in AEW's booking, so I'm going to trust them, but oh boy, am I nervous for that one. But yeah, no, great match with Kenny and Christian. This is, so it was quite well done.
Yeah, this is when we were disappointed that Christian was the one that debuted at that pay-per-view, I think it was Double or Nothing earlier this year. And we were all disappointed by that. This is kind of
Revolution.
It was Revolution. Okay. This is what we were expecting, like as far as like a big announcement or a big debut goes. And it's like that type of excitement where people you don't expect to see on AEW or guys that are like either still huge stars or in the prime of their career, like Adam Cole is, having them over on AEW was very, very exciting.
Yeah. And this did the same thing Double or Nothing 2019 did. And it's something that AEW, for all the great pay-per-views that they've done and all the great matches that they've done and all the great storylines and culminations that they've done, they've always had a problem with not quite having that amazing, like, what happens next ending? What's that cliffhanger I'm ending on? A lot of people get confused when I say cliffhanger because they're like, I paid for a match. I want a clean finish. No, I'm not saying that you like do a screw job in the match. What I'm saying is you have some aspect of story, whatever it is, whether it's Kenny and Don Callis saying they're going to take the thing to Impact, whether it's Jon Moxley showing up, whether it's, whatever it is, it's something that hooks you to the next show. I mean, that's great serialized television, right? Mm-hmm. And, they did it with Moxley in their debut. And I think that was something they needed to do because that was their first show. They needed to hit it out of the park. And they did it here. And I mean, we'll talk about the rating, but I mean, AEW beat Raw in 18-49 in the same week, which has never happened. They've done it in like the previous week versus the current week, but they beat Raw. And like, the fact that I'm saying this in 2022, that Raw's demo, which is the thing that Raw ranks number one in every week on the charts. AEW beat it. That's pretty fucking amazing. And I think it's a testament to the kind of buzz they've built up with these signings. And Patrick and I talked about this with Revolution when they signed Christian, and no offense to Christian, like Christian's one of my favorites. He's still a good performer. He obviously put an amazing performance here, but Patrick and I and other people and tons of people were speculating about this. And we were like, oh, is it going to be Brock? Is it going to be Punk? Is it going to be Daniel Bryan? Oh, it was Cena, Batista. And everybody was like, oh, Christian's a realistic possibility. Those other guys aren't realistic. I'm like, that is the most defeatist attitude I've ever heard. Like, you don't think stars can come to your company? And now these types of things don't seem so crazy, right? It doesn't seem crazy that CM Punk, Christian Cage, or Adam Cole choose to go to AEW. That's a big difference than being fired and then picked up. Although, a lot of times guys like Miro and Aleister Black and stuff want to leave or Andrade, and they get their release and then they go. So like, I mean, it's potato. But the fact is these guys are choosing to go there, and that's a big deal. And like, I mean, it's a big deal. And this is a company that is insane to say, but in 2021 has CM Punk, Daniel Bryan, Kenny Omega, Cody, Jon Moxley, the Young Bucks, Christian. It has Adam Cole. Like, it's insane the amount of stars that this company has. And if I were to tell you all these stars, you'd be like, oh my God, that's like, you're getting to a point where like you really have a loaded roster, and not just a loaded roster of workers, which is great, a loaded roster of stars, which will make a big difference at the box office, in the ratings, streaming numbers, everything. So,
and people are making comparisons to WCW, like when Hall and Nash went over. But when I saw Adam Cole, my first thought immediately was not necessarily Hall, Nash, or Hogan, but Lex Luger. Because when Luger joined WCW, he had just been on the WWE earlier that week, right? Like the night before or something crazy like that. And Adam
he was on SummerSlam the last. I mean, so he may have done some house shows, but I know but he definitely did SummerSlam. He did the run-in with Diesel and Mabel in the main.
Right. And Adam Cole, he was just there on NXT at the last takeover. So it's like, this is a guy that's fresh out of WWE, and he's going to AEW to be with his friends and his girlfriend, obviously. And it's like, it's just such a shock to see him this soon.
Yeah. And so I first of all, I think that's an amazing or a really insightful point. I didn't even think of that. It was truly a shocker, because I think people thought like he could show up, but he's probably not going to. And I have 2 points to make here. Number one, that's great, because when you do things like that, and when you have a surprise like that, and Adam Cole was the surprise, because they did the misdirection with Brian Danielson. Everybody knew he was coming, which was great, and we wanted him. But Adam Cole, nobody knew. And when you do have those surprises, I know TNT with Sting was like, don't do that, blah, blah, blah. But you establish your show as a show where anything can happen. I mean, look at Raw and Nitro in their peaks. You watched every week, and everybody at school watched because they wanted to know what was going to happen, who's going to show up, what's going on. And Raw forever has been the show where you know exactly the fuck what's going to happen. Nothing important happens there. You'll just have some stupid issue at the beginning, and then they'll get William Regal or whoever comes out and says, you're going to wrestle tonight. And then they say, oh, okay. And then whatever their stupid previous main event that they had, apparently they didn't book that. So that's out of there. That's the only thing that happens. But with these type of surprises, you establish a precedent for unpredictability. And that is great for the audience. The second thing I was going to say is, you're saying like I've heard people compare this to like Hall and Nash, and I've heard them do it negatively. And I'm like, dude, WCW signed Hall and Nash and then started beating the shit out of WWF. Like, it was like a few weeks later after they signed Hall and right after they signed Nash that they started beating WWE. So I'm like, yeah, I hope it's that. If I'm AEW, I hope it's that situation, because I want to get stars. It is so for the longest time, Patrick and I used to say, there's no individual draws, yada, 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 yada. And we were correct from the perspective of WWE makes no difference who they have, because everybody becomes the same and they get homogenized to the point where it doesn't really make a difference, and they're trying to make the brand the star. However, what has happened since the independent boom, and what AEW is doing, and what WCW and WWE used to do, is they are finding stars that make the difference. And it's a star-driven business. It totally is. And they're getting guys, and they're moving numbers, and they're like, it's huge. So that was the main event. I loved it. Patrick, other than the main event, I know you said you were marking out the whole show, but can you give us a second moment off the show that you really loved?
Well, as far as the matches go, and this might surprise people, and this match really fit into my more old school sensibilities, but if I had to pick a favorite match, I would go with Jericho and MJF, with Jericho's career on the line. That was, I was talking to somebody else about it the night of the show, and I was like, man, that was just a Memphis match through and through, just old school, all the old heel tricks, make MJF the dirtiest, most hateable heel in the world, starting with that amazing entrance where he copied the Y2J countdown. I think it's pure, like, story-driven, character-driven, theatrics-based match. That was just wonderful to watch, and I was on the edge of my seat the entire time, all the way through to the false finish that they did. I thought all of that was great, and I thought even in defeat, MJF looked like a megastar coming out of it.
Yeah. No, I thought that was great. I think it was like my second favorite match of the night. I know a lot of people didn't love it. To me, I thought it was a great, like, the babyface has been down and out. and like it's finally his opportunity to defeat this guy, and he did it. And so I thought it was a great end to this. And a lot of people always say like, oh, Erik, for years you've said you've got to put the younger guy over. And I would agree with that. And they have. MJF's beat Jericho like 100 times. Like Jericho is totally put over MJF. This loss didn't hurt MJF in the least. Like he quote unquote beat him. He can always say that he beat him. And it's like, that's the thing. You've always got to give MJF an out. Like it's difficult to do the clean. I know they had Mox beat him clean that one time, but Mox was the champion. I think it's fine. So yeah, I thought this was a great old school match. I thought it was, it told a very succinct story. I liked it a lot. The crowd was into it. I mean, that crowd did not want to see Jericho retire. And yeah, I'm going to call out a match that most people have called out. And I'm going to say it was one of my favorite matches I've ever seen. It was the Lucha Brothers and the Young Bucks. It was a match that had participants that I both like and also have issues with certain things that they do. But I thought this was such a good and interesting and fun cage match. And God, I want to say for the first like 75 to 80% of the match, I don't think they did it like a high spot or anything. Like it was a lot of the Young Bucks just beating the shit out of the Lucha Brothers, just working an old school heel style.
And being assholes. And it was great.
Being total assholes. And the crowd with the fuck the Young Bucks chant, and it goes back to what Patrick, when we interviewed Al Snow all those years ago, we talked about you have the audience and you find something they want, and then you make them beg for it, and you make them plead for it, and you make them crawl over glass for it, then you finally give it to them. And they Bucks have been champs for a while. I thought they were going to actually go a little longer, but
about a year, right?
Full Gear they won it.
Okay.
Yeah. So almost, yeah. And I was just like, the Lucha Brothers were down the whole time. I thought it was I thought it was great, like getting the sneakers with the thumbtacks on it. I thought was great heel work. And then they saved some high spots for the end. And I thought they paced it really well. I thought it was a much more mature pacing than stuff they've done in the past. I thought the best part of that match wasn't even the action, and the action was good. I thought it was the story. And I know the Young Bucks can be controversial, but if you've ever thought the Young Bucks or the Lucha Brothers to a lesser extent could not tell a story, I would, if you haven't seen this match, which I know most people have, I would watch this match because I think it's a very story heavy match. And it reminded me, you mentioned Memphis. It reminded me of like a Memphis style, like bloody match that you'd see on Friday night at, the local fucking chicken farm. What do they have down? Wherever they do shows down there.
Yeah, I thought this match was wonderful too. And to your point about heels and faces, like seeing Pentagon like get in the way to save his brother is one of those like aw type of moments, and it puts so much sympathy on the faces, and it makes the Bucks look even worse as heels, and it makes you want to see them get beat anymore. And that's always the type of stuff that I like about pro wrestling, when you're able to create those kind of moments. Yeah.
Now, the one thing I will say this did hurt was the fact that the Elite would have looked like bigger heels if when Brian came out and then the next night they had their belts. Like the Young Bucks still had their tag titles with Kenny having his world title. I thought that would have been cool. But it was still a great match. I thought Miro and Kingston was fine. I don't have a ton to say about that.
It was a solid kind of beat 'em up, throw 'em around type of match. So I enjoyed it.
Yeah. I thought Moxley and Kojima was like one of the weaker matches on the show. Obviously the selling point to that wasn't the match. It was Suzuki showing up and just like the fucking crowd in Chicago singing his theme. And then of course we got the match that we had last night, which was Moxley and Suzuki,
which was a really fun match.
Yeah. And it was cool to see like freaking Minoru Suzuki on Dynamite, So John Moxley's like, like path to destroy all the old guys in New Japan is going swimmingly.
There was the women's title match, which
Yeah.
I thought was another match that over-delivered. I didn't come into the Britt versus Statlander with a whole lot of hype, but I thought it was better than it probably would have been under normal circumstances. I thought they did really well. My only knock was that the flip pile driver or the Panama Sunrise wasn't the finish. Which nice little bit of foreshadowing for Adam Cole, though.
Yep. No, I agree with you on that. Britt's still a superstar. I mean, Statlander, I think, has a ton of potential. I think she's got a little bit to go, but Britt's a superstar. The women's battle royal, I think, was the best women's battle royal they've done. It was a really well done battle royal. I thought they set up a lot of cool storylines. Jade Cargill and Nyla Rose in like a hoss fight, I think, is could be super cool. You and I predicted Thunder Rosa. I think they're still saving it for down the road because Ruby Soho arrived, won the battle royal, was super over, came off like a superstar in her first appearance, and AEW picks up another top women's wrestler, and like they're just getting more talent, Patrick. They're just signing more stars.
And who was that Sky Blue that was there? I'd never seen her before, but the crowd seemed to know who she was, and
she wrestled on Rampage, I think, against Red Velvet or Dark, one of them. Apparently Red Velvet beat her the other day. So I guess that's how they knew her, since they've run 45 shows in Chicago in the last like week and a half.
I mean, there was also Paul White versus QT Marshall, which that was a pretty simple.
It was exactly what it needed to be. The 3-minute match in between the two of them. So they like knew, hey, when are we, apparently it was going to go as long as it needed to, or as short as it needed to. So it was there. And Paul White looked old as shit and out of shape, but he got a pay-per-view match on AEW. I thought that was nice. So,
and finally, I guess we'll give our thoughts on Punk versus Darby, which was the main selling point of the show.
Yeah. So, I liked the match. It was slow to start, and then it's picked up towards the end. I know people have pointed out that it's almost identical, or it has a lot of the key callbacks to Bret Hart versus 1-2-3 Kid in '94, which I think is interesting. But I also think it was really kind of weird how much Punk was playing like a heel style. He was really like slowing it down. He was really taking Darby down, which is an interesting choice for your first match back, but
in your hometown.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, and Darby was, it shows you how over Darby is, that he's in Chicago and he's like getting huge chants, against CM Punk, that's like kind of a testament to his level of popularity. So I like it. I liked it. I think we've said this before. Happy CM Punk is great for him as a person, but pissed off CM Punk is so much more interesting. So I hope I think we kind of saw that a little bit more on Dynamite when Taz interrupted him and he's like, don't interrupt me. And I thought we saw a little bit of the old CM Punk there. I'd like to see a little bit more of that, because I think, that's Punk raging against the machine or being angry at someone is why we find him so interesting. So I hope we see a little bit more of that.
Yeah, I enjoyed the match as well. I think for Punk's first match back, it was exactly what it needed to be in terms of like showing off, hey, he's in shape, and hey, he still looks good, and hey, he can still do most of the moves and everything that he used to do. So for a 7.5-year layoff, it's like, all right, he did pretty well. But watching Dynamite this week, again, I'm with you. He started off that promo kind of sounding a little bit like Cena, where it's like, hey,
oh my God, he just recapped all the information.
Yeah, he did. And I'm like, dude, we need pissed off Punk. That's the one we all like, and that's the one we all have a fondness for. It's just, I don't want him to become like a white meat babyface. I want him to be a raging asshole. Yeah.
All right. So yeah, and I thought the show as a whole was so good, though. The way, like, obviously you can be like, well, this match was good, but watching the show and how it flowed, like, to me, there was never a dull moment, really. It was like, it moved really well, which, from start to finish was just great. So I think as a whole, as the sum of, it was greater than the sum of its parts, and its parts were very good.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Even the pre-show match, we got Orange Cassidy and Jungle Boy doing their things, and the Blade came back, or the Butcher came back. So we've got that tag team again, which I'm happy to see.
Yeah. The Butcher hopefully done touring and he can start smashing his big old tricep meat into people's face.
Yeah.
All right. Dynamite. What'd you think of it, Patrick?
Overall, solid show. We're kind of getting into that early set up the foundation for the big matches that we want to do with the Adam Coles, the Daniel Bryans, and the CM Punks. And overall, I thought it was pretty solid, and I loved the main event.
So I loved the promo segment. I did think it was funny where he's like, I want a title shot. And Kenny Omega's like, it doesn't work like that here. And then like kind of Daniel Bryan made fun of it. I'm like, yeah, you do have to win some fucking matches, Daniel Bryan. I know. So I'm wondering if they're going to have like a gauntlet situation where Daniel Bryan is like plowing through the elite to get to Kenny Omega. I think you could do it both ways. You can do it or he has to get enough wins, or you could be like, listen, we know you're Brian Danielson. You can, you can get a title shot. It's like, like Sting didn't wrestle for a year and a half and he still got a title shot because you're like, yeah, we know his ability.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's kind of what happened to Christian. It's like, oh, he's a legend, so we're going to put him on this win streak to justify him getting a pay-per-view main event. So if Christian can get that, why not someone like Brian Danielson?
Yeah, well, I guess with Christian, he did get the wins though, So like in this situation, in this thing I've made up, Brian Danielson would just get the shot, but we don't know how it's going to go. So okay, so two big news items that I want to talk about, and then we can go to some Q&A if you want to pull that up, Patrick.
Sure.
So the first thing was today, and so this is from Sean Ross Sapp and Fightful, but there was a tweet saying basically that Kevin Owens' contract is coming up earlier than people think, which is January, which doesn't mean that it's up or he's even thinking of leaving. But obviously with all the people that have left lately, the idea is to say, hey, look, this guy could go too, which who knows if that'll happen or not. But, since it's out there, let's talk about it. I personally do not think on his own Kevin Owens is as big of a star as like Punk or Bryan or, honestly, even Adam Cole. I will say this, though. If Kevin Owens goes, you have lost a tremendous amount of people. And there is
in a very short span of time.
In a very short span of time. That creates the practical problem of like where you just don't have the amount of stars that we used to. And it creates this other problem, this perception that your company sucks and nobody wants to go there. And like people start to get wind of that. The audience gets wind of that. Investors get wind of that. Advertisers get wind of that. You can have like a stain on your company. And I mean, like, either you're saying things are going really poorly for WWE or things are going amazing for AEW, because it can't be both. I mean, I guess I'm sorry, it can be both. But the fact is things are going great for AEW, but WWE can't be happy that they're losing the demo from Dynamite to Raw. I mean, and now I'm hearing people like, oh, well, it didn't beat its debut episode. Like, that's where we're at, ladies and gentlemen. Like, my way to judge WWE is, oh, well, it didn't beat that episode that Austin beat Undertaker for the title. It didn't beat that. That was 11 million people watching. So it didn't beat that. It's not successful. So, like, I mean, if for everybody that's keeping track, the bar went from they're just a t-shirt company to they can't sell out 10,000 seat arena to they can't sell out the MGM Grand to they can't do this on a weekly basis to they can't draw people for their TV show to they can't beat NXT to, oh, well, they can only beat Raw in the key demo. So like, holy shit. Is it like in a year, they're going to be saying, well, they're beating SmackDown in the demo, but not total viewers. Like, is that like the goalposts keep fucking moving? And it's like, if you're keeping track, we've gone a long way from just a t-shirt company.
Yeah, can I go on a little rant here regarding that? It really reminds me of, and I'm saying this as a New York Giants fan, it really reminds me of Eli Manning, who always always got put down. Part of that is being in the New York market, who is notoriously critical of their quarterbacks. I mean, ask Phil Simms, ask anybody that served under center for New York. But part of it's because he's Peyton Manning's brother. He's the little brother of Peyton Manning, who's not as good. Oh, no, you're not as good as Peyton Manning. Fuck that guy. But it was always like every year, it was always that, oh, well, he'll never win a Super Bowl, or he'll never win a playoff game, and then he does. Then he'll never win a Super Bowl, and then he does. Well, he can't do it again, and then he does. 2-time Super Bowl MVP. And now it's like, well, he'll never make it to the Hall of Fame. It's like, you're going to tell a 2-time Super Bowl MVP he can't go to the Hall of Fame? That's ridiculous. But again, that's me being a Giants fan. Maybe I'm biased, but that's just how I feel. But I really sense that same situation here, where the goalpost just keeps moving and they keep succeeding despite what everybody else says. So, it seems to me like, at least for right now, AEW is here to stay, and they're just getting bigger and better.
Well, AEW is here to stay. It's just how much bigger can they get? I mean, like they just hired, I believe his name is Shane Emerson. He's basically going to be negotiating the international deals, which are valuable. I mean, WWE makes a hell of a ton of money on its international deals.
Saudi Arabia,
TNA. Well, so that's a. I mean, it's a kind of international deal.
Yeah.
I think they're looking for like broadcasting deals, but I think that's another thing that they're looking at. But TNA was able to stay afloat all those years because they had deals in other countries. And one of the things that they can do is they can say, hey, look, it's Chris Jericho. Look, it's Sting. Look, it's Adam Cole. Look, it's in the Japanese market, they can say, hey, it's Kenny Omega. Here's Brian Danielson. You've got a lot of bargaining power and you've got a lot of names. And when that comes in, then you're going to look in December 2022, about a year from now, a little after a year from now, you're going to start here negotiations. And maybe TNT will keep, or TBS rather, will keep Dynamite, or maybe, I don't know, maybe Paramount wants it, or maybe, I don't know, maybe CBS or some, Fox Sports, I don't know, somebody else wants it. And then you get a deal that's WWE sized. I mean, one of two things is going to happen. Either WWE's deals are going to go incredibly down because they're going to be like, hey, we're paying you like 20 times what we're paying them, and they're getting the same numbers. What the fuck? Or AEW is going to get a gigantic WWE size deal for their product. And then guess what? Then the billionaire company has even more billions to play with, but it's actually coming from the company. And then guess what? Guys like Brock Lesnar are in play. Guys like Roman Reigns are in play.
The Rock.
The Rock could even be in play. I mean, he tweeted the other day about Kevin Owens and Adam Cole. So like, Jesus, it's AEW is making a huge impact. And like the fact that it is 2 years after this company was founded and they are competing with WWE is a sentence I can't believe I'm saying, because it shouldn't be happening. WWE should crush them. WWE has more money. It has more brand recognition. It has a bigger footprint. It has more licensing deals. It has more talent. It has better production. There's no way this other company can beat them. If this other company is not doing all the stupid things WWE has done for the past 20 years. And by not doing those things, it's catching up to the other one. So it's just fascinating to me that this is happening.
And I was having this conversation with a friend of mine about a year ago. And I said, I could actually foresee AEW overtaking WWE in the ratings, not because AEW does exceptionally well in the ratings, although recently they've been going up and they did a really good number this week from what I've seen. But because WWE, they just keep screwing things up over and over and over again. It's like, how much longer is the audience going to put up with this? Like, I haven't watched a full episode of Raw or SmackDown all year long, and I don't feel like I've missed anything.
Yep.
So,
absolutely.
And going back to your point earlier, there's also rumblings that in addition to Kevin Owens, there's talks about Sami Zayn potentially leaving, and also Charlotte Flair, who is like their top woman performer after that disastrous match she had with Nia Jax, after the fact that her husband is now in AEW. And that there's a whole fresh crop of women talent for her to work with. She might even consider jumping, which would be insane to me because she's kind of like the women's version of like their John Cena or, what Ric Flair was to the NWA. She's just kind of like one of those pillars. And if she left, that would be insane.
Yeah. And I mean, like, okay, they can't call her Charlotte anymore. What? Oh, you have to call her Ashley Flair. Like, oh boy, no one will know who that. Like, I used to get worried for companies when like where wrestlers couldn't use their names, but with the internet and everything, and how connected and how fast everything moves, I don't think it matters anymore. I mean, like, remember Dean Ambrose in Double or Nothing 2019 showed up. Nobody was chanting Ambrose. Everybody was chanting Moxley, but nobody's known him as Moxley in like the public eye. They Googled it on the internet, and like maybe even then, or they heard somebody around them talking about it, and they instantly picked it up, and it was fine, and it was a switch, and nobody cared. I mean, I feel like in WCW days, they'd be like, who's John Tenta, but now it's like, we get who these people are.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also helps that John Moxley is a cooler name than Dean Ambrose anyway.
It's true.
That X makes all the difference.
Totally. All right. So why don't we go and grab some questions?
All right. Let's pull it up. All right. First one from Kama123. What was your first WrestleMania?
Watching?
I assume it just says what was your first. I'm assuming watching.
Both of our first actual at WrestleMania was
29.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But my first one that I saw was, well, I got two answers for this. WrestleMania 10 was the first one I saw, and WrestleMania 11 was the first one I saw live.
Okay. I think the first one I saw on videotape was WrestleMania 5, which the Hogan Savage main event. The first one I saw live on pay-per-view was WrestleMania 8. And I have a lot of fond memories of that.
The Hoosier Dome.
Yeah.
So big. That thing looked so big when I was I mean it still is big, but they do it now, but I remember thinking like, oh man, this is huge, and it's like a big spectacle. And I always thought it was like, I thought it was weird that they didn't try to do that again. Because for those of you who don't know, WWE, like 92 wasn't a good year for WWE, and it wasn't like you see the Hoosier Dome and you're like, wow, that's really big. They must have did really well. Well, it wasn't completely filled out. The tickets were cheaper. The idea behind that is you run a bigger thing and it makes you look bigger, but you run a smaller thing like Madison Square Garden. If you sell it out, you can charge way more for tickets. So, like WrestleMania is way cheaper to get into now than it used to be. When I say used to be, I mean like 22, 23, 21, that type of deal. But I always was like, man, that looks so big. I just wonder, like, why don't they keep doing that? And eventually, they started to go back to outdoor stadiums, so it feels like this big event, and it's worked. It's become this cultural thing. Like, even if you don't like WWE, like you watch WrestleMania, and it looks like such a big deal because it's in a football stadium, because there's 80,000 people, 90,000 people there. So yeah, I always thought it was odd that they didn't do more like that, and I'm glad that they do that now.
Yeah, and the thing I remember most about WrestleMania 8 was that I had T-ball practice earlier that day, and I was like, we need to wrap up this practice so I can go home and watch WrestleMania 8. So I don't know, like that panic and anxiety. It's like, oh my God, I'm here hitting a T-ball around. It's like, I don't want to do that. I want to watch wrestling. But I made it home on time, so it was a happy day for me.
What time did it start?
Memory serves me right. It was sometime in the afternoon, so like 3:00, something like that. Yeah.
Imagine them doing like a 3:00 wrestling. That would be great, actually, I think.
Oh yeah. I don't know how we settled on like this 8:00 on a Sunday night deal when it's like, dude, you do that shit.
You got a ton of fucking kids watching. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. Okay, next question from Gabe. Do you foresee AEW making the same mistakes as WCW by relying too heavily on former WWE stars?
It's hard to say. I could go both ways on this. So yes, I could, because I see Tony Khan being a very nice person and not saying no to people.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, Chris Jericho. I think there's a lot of times that Tony Khan says, hey, you can do this or whatever. And I don't know how much editing there is. So I wonder if he's going to be able to have that final control. On the other hand, it doesn't, like, most of the stuff he's done is good and like been like solid logic. So I feel like when he's not going to make bad decisions like that. Now, I want to make this clear. Relying too much on WWE talent isn't necessarily a problem. Now, WCW started beating WWF with WWF talent.
Mm-hmm.
The problem was when those talents overstay their welcome,
Yes,
and the storylines and everything become stale. I mean, by mid '99, the NWO had been around for 3 years. It was a boring idea. And Hulk Hogan had been essentially on TV in your living rooms for like 14 straight years at that point. And it was time for a fucking change. And there was never a point where they did it with Goldberg, and DDP. But beyond that, like guys like Jericho, Booker T, Raven, Buff Bagwell, Scott Steiner, they didn't get put into the mix. And it's not necessarily about age. It's about perceived freshness. Like, because DDP was old. He was like older than most of those guys. And so was Scott Steiner, really. But there was something 90s and contemporary about them. And I'll say this to this day. I was in high school during that point, and around 99 or 2000, like, I cannot tell you how uncool Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage and those guys were to people in my school. And if you brought them up, they would just be like, oh, the old guys. And what it was WWE's branding attempts. For years, WWE branded itself as like, we're the hot, young, crazy, in-your-face stars. And I mean, the new generation didn't really work from that perspective, but the Attitude Era was like that. It was the younger stars, but they had an attitude. And like, that branding worked. They said it enough. They said it as often enough. And people said, you know what? These guys are balding and they're kind of slow. And The Rock and Triple H and Steve Austin and Undertaker are really fucking cool. So like, yeah, if you're Bischoff or you're Tony Khan and you see a guy, and maybe it's Chris Jericho at some point, and probably it's been Chris Jericho, and you're like, oh man, he's fat and people think he sucks and he's tearing down the show, you got to move on from those guys, or at least diminish their role, because they'll become more of an albatross than they are helping your company. So I didn't answer your question. I don't really know. I could see it going both ways.
Right. I think as long as they don't use the stars in a way that stifles them creatively, like WCW or even TNA did, I think they'll be fine. And I've told you this, but I was rewatching some old episodes of Nitro a while back. And on one episode, they had a stare down between Raven and Randy Savage. And that was like such a unique pairing to me. It's like, I never would have envisioned those two ever even being in the same arena together or even the same roster together, much less, actual face-to-face. And they never really followed up on it. It's like, that could have been huge for Raven if they had him paired up with a lunatic like Randy Savage, and they just never went that route. They just didn't jump on the really hot ideas or the interesting pairings, even with the older guys, that they still could have done. That they just kept doing the same old stuff over and over again. And
what episode was that?
I think it was before Raven had debuted officially.
Oh, okay. So it was July 97 or June or July 97. I know
something along those lines, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
It was during his period where he was sitting in the crowd.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Okay. Next question from Sasha. Okay, this one could be kind of long. Favorite matches from WCW, WWE, ECW, TNA, New Japan, ROH, and AEW.
Holy shit!
All right.
Let me write like a thing down so I have it.
Okay. I'm already thinking about mine.
There's
while
no
you're writing
WWE
down, I'll start rattling them off.
So it's WCW, ECW, ROH, TNA. What else?
WWE, New Japan, and AEW.
Okay. All right, I'm writing mine down. Everybody take a second and Patrick, you start going or something. I don't know.
Okay, ROH. Off the top of my head, I would say the Fight Without Honor between Kevin Steen and El Generico. I think it was at Final Battle. That one is pretty high. Oh, also the unification match, Brian Danielson versus Nigel McGuinness, where they unified the ROH World and Pure titles. That one's pretty high up there. AEW, it's Cody versus Dustin for me, without a doubt. New Japan, I would say Okada versus Omega, the 1 hour draw. So their second big match. TNA, I would say America's Most Wanted versus Triple X and Six Sides of Steel from Turning Point. WCW, I would say Sting versus Vader in the strap match from Super Brawl 3, I believe it was. WWE is a very tough one, but right now I'm leaning on Brett versus Bulldog at SummerSlam 92. Although if you ask me again tomorrow, I'll probably have 10 different answers. And ECW, I'd probably say, just for the sheer barbaric nature of it, like the Funk Sabu barbed wire match.
All right. It's fucking harder than I thought. All right. Everybody knows the WWE one. My WWE pick, which I probably know most about WWE. So Shawn Michaels and Undertaker, Bad Blood.
Mm-hmm.
My New Japan one is the same as yours. It's Okada and Omega, the draw at Dominion. Oh God, these I don't know what's my AEW one. What is it? It's okay. Is it a? I feel like I'm going through my head here. I'm thinking like I love Cody matches. I do love Cody and Dustin. So Cody and Dustin is up there. I do love Moxley and Jericho at Revolution. I'll go Cody and Dustin as well.
Okay.
But like, that could change. WCW was so hard. Because all of like most of WCW's main events were terrible. And that's normally so okay. So I have two I'll throw out there. The first is Jericho and Dean Malenko at Slamboree 98.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it was built up so well and that crowd is like so on fire. The other one would be the Bash at the Beach 96 main event because there was just so much anticipation, so much buzz in that thing, and Hall and Nash like were total killers. ECW. Holy shit. I would say I don't have one, but like one of the Jerry Lynn RVD matches.
Yeah.
Like maybe Living Dangerously. Wait. No, was it Hardcore Heaven 98 or Living Dangerously 98?
They may have wrestled in both shows. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So one of those, I would say. Ring of Honor, quite honestly, I did not watch enough Ring of Honor to have that strong of an opinion on it. So like I'm gonna pass on that one. TNA, is kind of like Ring of Honor. I watched it sporadically. I don't have like an encyclopedic knowledge like I do WWE. I liked Matt Morgan and Angle at Bound for Glory 2009. But so, I mean, I guess, I don't know, I'll say that. AJ and Sting had a good one on that same show. I don't know. I guess.
Yeah. Those are fair answers.
Yeah, I just like, I don't know. I would go in and out with TNA, and I was a college student when TNA was at its peak, so like I didn't have a ton of money for pay-per-views, so I didn't see a ton of them, honestly.
Okay, next question from Yo-Yo. This could we're getting into non-wrestling territory with this one. Which is worse, the prequel trilogy or the sequel trilogy? I'm assuming
sequel trilogy. Sequel trilogy by far is way worse.
I would agree, and I can't believe I'm saying this because I dislike both, but the prequel trilogy, I will say, at least it's a beginning, a middle, and an end. I'll give it that at least. Whereas the sequel trilogy just turned out to be such a goddamn clusterfuck of two directors just butting heads with each other and having conflicting visions that the entire thing was a mess. So I'm going to go prequel on this one.
The prequel. So I will defend the prequels. I'm not going to tell you that the things that are bad about them aren't bad, because like, Jar Jar Binks sucks and stuff, but I do have an affinity for them. Once again, not because they're great movies. But I will say this, the prequels are a good idea that is executed poorly. The idea behind the prequels is very different from the original trilogy. It's the fall of a democracy into a dictatorship. And how does that happen? And how do we get there? And that's the story. And along with the fall of basically a fallen hero as well. The sequel trilogy has no original ideas. It is almost like J.J. Abrams took the fucking New Hope script and did find and replace with different characters and like, oh, okay, Han will be Obi-Wan and Rey will be Luke and Snoke will be Palpatine, and I know Palpatine wasn't in the first one. And Hux will be Tarkin, and like, it's just like, it's the laziest fuck. Like, we'll destroy a super weapon, which, like, I can't fucking believe that even happens in that movie. We're like, it's like a Death Star, and then he's like,
what bigger?
It's 4 times the size. I'm like, I literally laughed out loud in the theater when I saw that. I'm like, what did a fucking child write this shit? Like, it's like, this is my idea for Star Wars sequels when I was in 6th grade. It's like, well, when you don't have an idea in your head and you're like, well, it's let's do the same thing that happens there because we don't have an original idea, but everything will be bigger. It'll be like the Sun Destroyer. It's basically those weird expanded universe, like, killer weapons that they had from like the Tarkin Doctrine.
I was actually going to reference that because after reading so many of those books from my childhood, when I saw, I forget, was it Star Killer Base? I think it was called.
Yes.
The super mega Death Star. I saw that and I'm like, oh my God, we're getting another planet killer. I've read about and seen like 100 of these things. What the fuck?
The Galaxy Gun. And then we're going to have Galaxy Gun.
The Darksaber. That was another one.
Well, the Darksaber, I'll defend that. That's in the Clone Wars series.
Oh, that's a different thing. There's a Darksaber in the EU that was like it was like a Death Star, except it was shaped like a big lightsaber. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. This is a thing. Yeah.
So I knew all about the World Destroyers, which like eat the planets and then like make material, and the Galaxy Gun.
The Sun Crusher was the worst.
The Sun Crusher, yeah. It's just like, let's think of the same shit. See, at least the prequels don't do that. The prequels are like, oh, I'm making this subversive army and I'm like demonizing political opponents, and like that's like, I mean, it wasn't done well because I don't like sand, but like, it was an idea at least. So I 10 times out of 10 will say the prequels over the sequel trilogy, which like it is like a fucking mess. And don't give me this shit. Don't give me this goddamn shit that like, oh, Rise of the Skywalker ruined all this stuff. Fuck that. That shit was ruined the second Force Awakens came out. Like that movie sucks because it's like, it's just A New Hope with like newer actors. And then The Last Jedi, it's like, okay, I guess I'll like see what happens to all these fucking people. And it's like, oh, fuck you. And it's like, guess what? Nothing makes any sense anymore. And you're like, oh, Jesus. And then they're like, nah, let's just go back to the most disjointed 3 movies I've ever seen in my life. Like, Kathleen Kennedy's a fucking idiot.
Seriously, go and watch all 3 of those movies in a row and tell me that they belong together. Because narratively wise, they don't at all. Like, no, nothing makes sense.
They're like incredibly confused. I mean, people. Yeah. Oh my God. Like the idea that there was no plan for these is just like, what? Oh my God. That's J.J. Abrams. That is classic J.J. Abrams. That guy has never completed anything like to throughness. He just has a great upfront idea. I mean, I'm a fan of Lost. Like people say, well, this is kind of like Lost. The fuck it is. Damon Lindelof did Lost. J.J. Abrams directed the pilot, and Damon Lindelof had an ending. If you may have liked or not liked the ending, it had a fucking ending. I happen to like the ending a lot, but and it actually makes fucking sense. J.J. Abrams just says, "Oh, do the mystery box, and then we'll figure out what's in there later." It's terrible.
3 points I want to make. One, 3 fucking movies, and I still don't know what the First Order is. I have no idea what they are. The Separatists and all that shit, I at least understand what it is. And it didn't take 3 movies to explain it.
They explain it, the Separatists, in 2 seconds. And they're like, oh, they don't want to be part of the Republic anymore. Like the First Order, it's like, why is this basically the Empire, but also the Empire was killed?
I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. But my second point, the fact that I've lived long enough to see 2 Star Wars trilogies get botched is super depressing to me. And my third point, I feel like we owe George Lucas an apology. Anybody who shat on him over the years is like, look, that dude at least tried. These people didn't try.
And I'll say this: the best 2 new Star Wars movies are the ones that have nothing to do with the trilogy. Rogue One is perhaps the best Star Wars movie. It's fantastic. And Han Solo is a fun adventure movie. And those movies were great. And they had nothing to do with the trilogy. And you watch those things and you're like, this is the fucking shit I wanted from the Star Wars movies. You can do something new with a classic theme, but also have updated special effects. This is the kind of shit I wanted.
Yeah. And Rogue One especially, I was like, this feels like an expanded universe novel, one of the good ones. And it's kind of great. And I enjoyed it.
Yeah. And The Mandalorian. So there's plenty of good stuff. Good. And if you guys have Disney Plus, I would recommend the Clone Wars, Rebels, and the Bad Batch. The new animated series is very good too. So there's a lot of good stuff out there. It mostly starts and ends with Dave Filoni because he's basically the guy that should be running this. So yeah.
And good for him. I haven't watched the Bad Batch yet, but I'll have to check that out.
It's good.
Okay. And final question from Mama. What are your favorite movies to watch on Halloween?
Oh, okay. So that's very interesting. I'll let Patrick go. So
I have a lot. I have a lot. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking obviously Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, the original Exorcist, the original Godzilla, the Japanese original 1954 film. I love watching that on Halloween.
Not the Raymond Burr one?
No, I prefer the original. And any of the great Universal classic monster movies like the Draculas, the Frankensteins, the Wolfman, those are just so classic to me that they're perfect to watch in October around Halloween time.
So I do not have a specific movie that I like to watch. However, what I do every year, because I am a big Halloween and horror movie fan, and my wife is not, by the way, she does not like them at all. So Halloween is the only time she will allow me to watch horror movies with her around. So what I do is I have a list. And it's a list of subject matter for horror movies. So to give you the example of the list, here's what it is: demons, mad scientists, aliens, ghosts, mutants, witches, cannibals, kaiju, werewolves, zombies, animals, monsters, vampires, robots, mummies, or killers. By the way, monsters basically encompasses anything that's not in the above of those ones. So what I do is I have her pick 2. And then we'll watch those 2 movies Halloween night or the night before. We'll watch, sometimes it's hard to watch 2 movies in a night because I'm old and I go to sleep at 9:30. So I'll pick a movie based on that. And then to make sure she's not repeating the same subject each year, the ones that she picks goes on the bench for 2 years. So, for instance, Mummies and Killers were last year. We watched the Boris Karloff Mummy, and we watched Scream, and so those 2 subjects are on the bench. And the year before that, we did vampires and robots. So we watched The Terminator, which, by the way, The Terminator is 100% a horror movie.
Yes,
it is paced exactly and shot like a horror movie. And vampires, we watched Peter Cushing in The Curse of Dracula.
Ooh, the good one.
Yeah, so we did those. So that's got 1 more year. So this year, I'm kind of annoyed because she's never picked demons, aliens, ghosts, cannibals, mutants, werewolves, or zombies. So I was hoping
He
one of
has
those
picked kaiju before. That's interesting.
She did. We watched The Host.
Oh, nice. That's a good one.
That was many years ago. She picked witches and animals, which she's picked previously because we watched a few years ago. In fact, I think this is the first year they're back on. So I think like 3 years ago, we watched Suspiria and Grizzly. So now I need, basically I need a witch and an animal movie for Halloween. So I'm going to do something that I don't know if it will work, but if anyone who normally sends us questions would like to send suggestions for horror movies that are in those in that contain the monster being a witch or some sort of animal, I will readily accept those. Keep in mind, you can't put fucking Hereditary on there because she's not going to fucking watch that. She like will not watch if it's too scary. So like think like, not that. No Ari Aster movies. It's got to be like, like I don't know, like fucking Rosemary's Baby or something,
Right. I have a suggestion. I don't know if you've checked this out. It's a bit of a 90s time capsule movie, The Coven.
No, I haven't even heard of that. Obviously,
I think that's the title.
Obviously, The Craft is the big one, but
okay. I'm sorry, that's the one I was thinking of.
So yes, I've seen that.
Okay, yeah. So she might enjoy that one, and Fairuza Balk is batshit crazy in it. So
I think she's seen that. I feel like everybody that grew up in the '90s saw The Craft.
Probably saw it. Yeah. A good witch movie. That's a tough one. The new Conjuring movie has a witch in it.
Yeah, so she's not super cool with the modern ones. So I feel like
Hocus Pocus, you might have to go that route.
She loves Hocus Pocus. So we showed her Suspiria. So I feel like what's his name? Argento has other ones, but they can get like super violent. So I wonder, we'll have to see. But if you guys have suggestions for either of those, send them to the email address along with other questions, and we'll talk about it next time.
All right, sounds good.
Patrick, give them the email address.
The email address is weekdaywarriors2020@gmail.com. I will also put it in the description of this episode.
All right. Okay, cool. So everybody enjoy football fun time. And for myself and my partner, Mr. Patrick Kelly, we are
signing off.